Most people think the future will reward the smartest, the fastest, or the most talented. But that's not how progress actually works. The future doesn't belong to those who know more. It belongs to those who think differently. In 2026, your biggest enemy won't be competition technology or the economy. Your biggest enemy will be an outdated mindset, one that was designed for a world that no longer exists. And here's the uncomfortable truth: if your mindset doesn't evolve, no amount of skill will save you. You can work harder, you can learn more, you can stay busy every day and still fall behind quietly, slowly, and painfully because you're solving tomorrow's problems with yesterday's thinking. That's why this conversation matters. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because if you fix these mindset patterns, you don't just survive 2026, you lead in it. And if you don't, the world will move on without you. Stay with me until the end, because the final shift may be the one that changes everything about how you see yourself and what you believe you're capable of becoming. We were taught directly and indirectly that stability is the ultimate goal. From an early age, the message was clear: find something secure, hold onto it tightly, and don't risk too much. Choose the safe path. Pick the reliable option. Stay where things feel predictable. For a long time, that belief made sense. Stability once meant survival, it meant protection, it meant safety. But the world that created that advice no longer exists, and yet many people are still living by its rules. In 2026, stability is no longer what we think it is. The idea that something can remain unchanged long enough to protect you is an illusion. Jobs that once lasted decades now disappear in years. Industries that seemed untouchable are reshaped overnight. Skills that were valuable yesterday quietly expire without warning. The danger is not that these changes happen. The danger is believing they won't. The safest position today is not standing still. It's learning how to move. It's understanding that motion, not stillness, is what keeps you relevant. When you stand still in a moving world, you don't stay safe, you fall behind. Stability that depends on things staying the same is fragile, because change is no longer an exception. It is the default. Many people confuse comfort with security. Comfort feels safe because it's familiar. You know what to expect, you know how to perform, you know where you stand. But comfort can quietly become a trap. The longer you stay comfortable, the less prepared you become for disruption. And disruption doesn't announce itself politely. It arrives suddenly, and when it does, comfort offers no protection. Security no longer comes from what you do. It comes from how quickly you can adapt when what you do stops working. This is a difficult shift for many people to accept, because identity often becomes attached to roles, titles, and routines. When those things change, it can feel personal. It can feel like failure. But the truth is simpler and far less emotional. The world moved, and you either move with it or struggle against it. Adaptability is not about abandoning everything at the first sign of difficulty. It's about staying mentally flexible. It's about being willing to learn again, even when you're already good at something. It's about recognizing that expertise is temporary unless it's supported by curiosity. The moment you believe you've arrived, you stop preparing for what's next. Those who thrive are not the ones with the most stable plans. They are the ones with the strongest ability to adjust their plans. They don't cling to a single path as if it's their only option. They build multiple ways forward. They invest in skills that transfer, not just skills that fit one role. They understand that learning is no longer a phase of life, it's a permanent requirement. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle change. When you trust your ability to adapt, uncertainty loses its power over you. You stop fearing disruption because you know you can respond to it. This kind of confidence doesn't come from guarantees. It comes from experience gained by stepping outside comfort and learning to navigate unfamiliar territory. Chasing stability often leads people to avoid risk altogether. But avoiding all risk doesn't eliminate danger, it simply delays it. Small intentional risks taken early are far less costly than forced risks taken later. When change is chosen, it feels empowering. When change is forced, it feels threatening. The difference lies in preparation. Flexibility is not chaos, it's structure that can bend without breaking. It's having a foundation strong enough to support growth in new directions. It's knowing your values well enough that even when circumstances shift, you don't lose your sense of purpose. Stability rooted in values can survive change. Stability rooted in conditions cannot. The people who struggle the most during periods of change are often the ones who did everything right according to old rules. They followed the path, stayed loyal, avoided disruption, and waited for stability to reward them. When the system changes, it feels unfair. But the lesson is not that effort was wasted. The lesson is that effort now be paired with adaptability. In 2026, safety comes from being useful in more than one way. It comes from being able to learn faster than the environment changes. It comes from staying open instead of defensive. When you stop chasing comfort and start building flexibility, you don't fear change, you expect it. You prepare for it, you even welcome it, because change becomes an opportunity rather than a threat. This shift requires letting go of the idea that there is one destination where everything finally becomes secure. There isn't. Growth is ongoing, learning is ongoing, reinvention is ongoing. And that's not something to resist. It's something to master. When you accept that stability is not a permanent state, but a temporary condition, you stop building your life around things staying the same. You start building your life around your ability to respond when they don't. And that is where real safety now lies, not in holding on tighter, but in learning how to move forward again and again, no matter what changes around you. Many people delay action because they believe clarity must come first. They wait for the perfect idea, the complete plan, the moment when everything finally makes sense. They tell themselves they'll start once the uncertainty disappears. But uncertainty doesn't disappear. It never has. The belief that clarity is a prerequisite for action is one of the most common reasons people stay stuck. Not because they lack ability, but because they're waiting for a feeling that only comes after they move. Clarity does not come before movement. It comes because of movement. You don't discover the path by standing still and thinking harder. You discover it by taking a step and seeing what changes. Direction reveals itself through action. Each small decision creates information. Each attempt teaches you something you couldn't have learned by planning alone. The problem is that many people mistake hesitation for preparation, when in reality it's often fear wearing the disguise of logic. The future will not reward those who are the most certain. Certainty is comfortable, but it's also limiting. When you demand certainty, you close yourself off to possibility. You ignore signals that don't fit your expectations. You become attached to being right instead of being effective. In a world that changes as fast as this one does, certainty becomes obsolete quickly. Curiosity, on the other hand, stays relevant. Curious people ask better questions. They explore instead of defend, and they experiment instead of wait. They are willing to say, "I don't know yet," without seeing it as weakness. That mindset allows them to learn faster, adjust sooner, and move forward while others are still debating whether it's safe to begin. Curiosity keeps you in motion, and motion is what creates progress. Many people believe they need a perfect plan to avoid mistakes, but perfection doesn't prevent mistakes. It prevents learning. Plans that look flawless on paper rarely survive contact with reality. Markets shift. People change, assumptions break. When that happens, those who relied on perfection feel lost, while those who relied on momentum simply adjust. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a strong reason. A clear why gives you direction even when the path is unclear. It anchors you when things don't go as expected. When you know why you're moving, you don't panic when you need to change how you move. Purpose creates resilience. Plans alone do not. Starting without guarantees feels uncomfortable because it challenges the illusion of control. But guarantees were never real to begin with. Even the safest decisions come with risk. The difference is that action teaches you how to manage that risk, while inaction only amplifies fear. When you start, you replace imagined outcomes with real feedback. And real feedback is far more useful than endless speculation. Momentum changes how you think. Once you're moving, problems become specific instead of abstract. You're no longer overwhelmed by everything that could go wrong. You're focused on what's directly in front of you. That focus builds confidence, not because you suddenly have all the answers, but because you trust yourself to find them along the way. Progress does not reward perfection. Perfection is static. It assumes a finished state. Progress is dynamic. It assumes constant improvement. The people who move forward are not those who wait until they feel ready, but those who accept that readiness is something you build, not something you wait for. Each step forward increases your capacity to handle the next one. Waiting for clarity often feels responsible, but it can quietly become a form of avoidance. It keeps you safe from failure, but it also keeps you safe from growth. The irony is that by trying to avoid mistakes, you often miss opportunities that only exist for those willing to act early and learn fast. Momentum doesn't require confidence. Confidence is often the result of momentum. When you see yourself making progress, even imperfect progress, your belief in your ability grows. You stop asking whether you can do it and start asking how to do it better. That shift changes everything. In the future, the advantage will belong to those who are willing to move with incomplete information. Not recklessly, but intentionally, they will test ideas, gather insight, and refine their direction in real time. They will understand that action is not the opposite of thinking. It's part of the thinking process. When you let go of the need to have all the answers, you free yourself to begin. And once you begin, you discover that answers are not found at the starting line. They are found along the way through movement, curiosity, and the courage to keep going even when the outcome is not yet clear. Independence sounds powerful. It feels strong, self-reliant, and admirable. We are taught to stand on our own, to prove ourselves, to show that we don't need help. From an early age, success is often framed as a solo journey where the strongest individuals rise through sheer effort and determination. But while independence can be useful, isolation is expensive, and many people don't realize the cost until progress becomes slow, heavy, and unnecessarily difficult. No meaningful progress is made alone. Every breakthrough, every movement, every lasting impact is built on shared effort. Even the most celebrated individuals stand on foundations laid by others, mentors, collaborators, supporters, and teams. The myth of the lone achiever is comforting, but it's rarely true. When you try to carry everything by yourself, you limit not only your reach, but your growth. In 2026, influence will matter more than authority. Titles will matter less than trust. Position will matter less than connection. You can have the best idea in the room, but without influence, it goes nowhere. Influence is not something you demand. It's something you earn. And it's built through relationships, consistency, and a willingness to work with others rather than over them. Collaboration will outperform competition because complexity has increased. Problems today are too layered, too fast-moving, and too interconnected for one person to solve alone. When people collaborate, they bring different perspectives, skills, and experiences into the same space. That diversity doesn't slow progress, it accelerates it. Competition may push individuals to improve, but collaboration allows groups to create what individuals never could. People who build trust always move faster than those who rely only on talent. Talent can open doors, but trust keeps them open. Trust reduces friction, it shortens conversations, it eliminates the need for constant proof. When people trust you, they give you the benefit of the doubt, they listen, they support, they commit. Without trust, even the most talented person spends too much energy convincing instead of building. Doing everything alone often comes from a desire to prove worth. It's the belief that asking for help makes you look weak, or that sharing credit diminishes your value. But growth doesn't come from proving how capable you are. Growth comes from understanding what you can't do alone and choosing to build with others anyway. Strength is not about carrying everything yourself. It's about knowing when to share the load. There is also a hidden cost to isolation perspective. When you work alone, your thinking becomes narrow. You hear only your own doubts, assumptions, and biases. Collaboration challenges your thinking. It forces you to explain your ideas, defend them, refine them, or sometimes let them go. That process doesn't weaken good ideas, it strengthens them. And it protects you from blind spots you may never see on your own. Many people confuse self-reliance with self-sufficiency. Self-reliance means you take responsibility for your growth and actions. Self-sufficiency assumes you never need anyone else. One leads to maturity, the other leads to limitation. The most effective people take ownership of their path while actively building relationships that expand what's possible. Building with others also requires vulnerability. You have to be willing to say, I don't know, or I need support, or I could use another perspective. That vulnerability can feel uncomfortable, especially in environments that reward confidence and certainty. But vulnerability is not weakness, it's an invitation. It invites collaboration, trust, and shared ownership. And shared ownership creates commitment. In the future, speed will belong to networks, not individuals. Those who are connected, trusted, and collaborative will adapt faster than those who try to master everything themselves. When one person learns, the group benefits. When one person struggles, the group supports. That collective resilience is something no individual can replicate alone. When you shift from doing it alone to building together, your role changes. You stop trying to be the hero and start becoming the connector. You stop asking how you can prove yourself and start asking how you can contribute. That shift doesn't make you less valuable, it makes you indispensable. People remember how you made them feel long after they forget what you achieved alone. They remember whether you listened, supported, and shared credit. They remember whether you built trust or burned bridges. In a connected world, reputation travels faster than results, and reputation is shaped by how you work with others. When you let go of the mindset that you must do everything alone, you don't lose independence, you gain leverage, you gain perspective, you gain momentum. And most importantly, you gain the ability to grow beyond the limits of your own talent by learning how to build something bigger with others. Failure has been misunderstood for a long time. It has been framed as a warning sign, a judgment, or a final answer. Many people see failure as proof that they are not capable, not talented enough, or not meant to succeed. Because of that belief, failure often becomes a signal to stop, to retreat, to play smaller. But failure is not a verdict. It is not a definition of who you are. It is feedback. And when understood correctly, feedback is one of the most valuable tools for growth. Those who succeed don't fail less than everyone else. They fail better. They fail with intention, with awareness, and with the willingness to learn. They extract information from failure instead of attaching emotion to it. While others see a dead end, they see a message. While others feel embarrassed or discouraged, they become curious. This difference in interpretation is what separates those who move forward from those who give up too early. In the coming years, progress will demand experimentation. The world is changing too fast for rigid plans to survive untouched. New ideas, new systems, and new ways of working will require testing, adjusting, and trying again. Experimentation, by its very nature, guarantees mistakes. You cannot test something new and expect every attempt to work perfectly. Expecting success without failure is like expecting growth without effort. It ignores how learning actually works. Many people avoid experimentation because they are trying to protect their identity. They don't want to be seen as wrong. They don't want to look unprepared or inexperienced. But when you avoid failure to protect your image, you sacrifice your potential. Growth requires you to step into spaces where outcomes are uncertain and where mistakes are not just possible, but likely. If failure still feels personal, you'll avoid growth. When failure is tied to self-worth, every mistake feels like a threat. You stop taking risks, you choose safe paths. You stay within boundaries that feel comfortable but limit your progress. The fear of failing becomes stronger than the desire to improve, and slowly ambition is replaced with caution. But when failure becomes data, everything changes. Data has no emotion. It doesn't insult you. It doesn't judge. It simply tells you what worked and what didn't. When you treat failure as data, you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what can this teach me? That shift turns setbacks into stepping stones. People who become unstoppable are not immune to failure. They are fluent in it. They understand that each failure narrows the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Every mistake removes an incorrect option and brings clarity. Progress often looks messy from the outside, but inside, it is a process of constant refinement. There's also a timing problem with failure. Early failures feel loud and visible. Success, on the other hand, often arrives quietly after many unseen attempts. This imbalance causes people to overestimate the importance of a single failure and underestimate the cumulative effect of persistence. They quit too soon because they mistake early resistance for permanent rejection. The most dangerous failures are not the ones that happen when you try. They are the ones that happen when you stop trying. Those failures don't provide feedback, they provide regret. And regret is far harder to learn from because it's built on what never happened. When you normalize failure as part of the process, you reduce its emotional weight. You become calmer in uncertainty. You respond instead of react. Instead of panicking when something doesn't work, you adjust. That calm response allows you to make better decisions, which increases your chances of success over time. Failure also builds resilience in a way that success never can. Success can make you comfortable. Failure forces you to adapt. It strengthens your ability to recover, rethink, and re-engage. Each time you survive a failure, you prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort. That proof builds confidence far more durable than any quick win. The people who lead in the future will not be those who avoided mistakes. They will be the ones who learned the fastest. They will understand that failure is not the opposite of success, but part of it. The moment you stop seeing failure as a signal to stop and start seeing it as a signal to learn, you remove one of the biggest barriers to progress. At that point, failure no longer slows you down, it points you forward. Likes, views, approval, applause, these things feel good, and that's exactly why they are so powerful. They provide instant feedback, quick affirmation, and a sense of belonging. In a world that moves fast and rewards visibility, validation has become easy to access and hard to resist. But while it feels good, validation is an unreliable teacher. It tells you how people react, not whether what you're doing truly matters. When confidence depends on external validation, direction slowly slips out of your hands. Your decisions begin to orbit around reactions instead of purpose. You start adjusting your behavior to maintain approval rather than to pursue meaning. Without realizing it, you hand control of your direction to opinions that change daily and often contradict each other. What begins as motivation turns into dependency. The problem with validation is not that it exists, but that it's inconsistent. What earns praise today may be ignored tomorrow. What gets applause in one room may be criticized in another. When your confidence rises and falls with these reactions, stability becomes impossible. You are constantly recalibrating yourself to fit expectations that are never fixed. This dependency creates a subtle fear of disapproval. You start avoiding honest expression. You choose what is popular over what is necessary. You hesitate to take risks because mistakes might be visible. Over time, this fear doesn't just limit creativity, it erodes self-trust. When you constantly look outward for confirmation, you stop listening inward. The most fulfilled people don't ask, "Do they like me?" They ask, "Am I building something meaningful?" That question shifts the focus from reaction to intention. Meaning does not always receive immediate applause. In fact, meaningful work is often misunderstood at first. If approval is required to continue, many important ideas never survive long enough to make an impact. When your standards become internal, something powerful happens. You no longer need constant reassurance to keep going. You measure progress by alignment, not applause. You ask whether your actions reflect your values, whether you are growing, and whether the work you're doing contributes to something bigger than your ego. That internal compass keeps you steady even when external signals are noisy or negative. Internal standards don't mean ignoring feedback. They mean choosing which feedback matters. Constructive input can help you improve. Random approval or criticism should not define you. When you are grounded in your own standards, feedback becomes information, not identity. You can listen without losing yourself. The addiction to validation often starts early. Praise becomes associated with worth. Silence becomes associated with failure. Over time, this conditioning teaches people to perform instead of create. They learn to seek attention rather than substance. Breaking that habit requires intentional effort and repeated practice because the pull of validation is emotional, not logical. Resilience grows when you learn to keep going without applause. When you can work in silence, improve without recognition, and stay committed without guarantees, you build a strength that cannot be taken away. External rewards can enhance motivation, but they should never be the foundation of it. There is freedom in not needing to be liked by everyone. When you release that need, you give yourself permission to be honest, to evolve, and to make decisions that align with your values rather than trends. That freedom allows you to take longer paths, build deeper work, and withstand periods where progress is invisible. The irony is that when you stop chasing validation, your work often improves. Without the pressure to please, you focus more on quality and intention. You take the time to think deeply, refine your ideas, and stay committed even when the results are slow. Over time, that depth attracts genuine respect rather than fleeting approval. When standards are internal, resilience becomes unshakable because it is no longer tied to outcomes you can't control. You don't collapse when praise disappears, and you don't lose direction when criticism appears. You remain anchored. And in a world where attention shifts constantly, that anchor becomes one of the greatest advantages you can have. We've trained ourselves to want results now. The world has conditioned us to expect speed in everything we do. Information arrives instantly. Messages are delivered in seconds. Success stories are packaged as overnight transformations. Fast success, quick wins, instant recognition. These ideas have become the standard by which progress is measured. But this expectation has quietly rewired how we think, and not in our favor. Short-term thinking feels productive because it offers immediate feedback. You do something and quickly see a result. When that result doesn't appear, frustration sets in, doubt follows. Many people then abandon their effort, assuming it isn't working. But the absence of immediate results does not mean the absence of progress. It often means progress is happening beneath the surface, where it can't yet be seen. The future will reward those who play the long game. Long-term thinkers understand that meaningful growth compounds. They know that small actions repeated consistently create outcomes that sudden bursts of intensity never can. Intensity looks impressive, but consistency is powerful. A single surge of effort may create motion, but sustained effort creates direction. Small, consistent actions done daily will always outperform intensity done occasionally. Daily habits shape identity. They change how you think, how you respond, and how you perform over time. Occasional intensity relies on motivation, and motivation is unreliable. Consistency relies on commitment, and commitment is durable. When effort becomes routine, progress becomes inevitable. Short-term thinking often leads to reactive decisions. When results slow, people change direction too quickly. They jump from one strategy to another, one goal to the next, hoping something will finally deliver immediate success. In doing so, they reset their progress over and over again. Long-term thinkers stay the course long enough to allow momentum to build. In 2026, patience will not be passive. It will be strategic. Strategic patience means understanding timelines. It means knowing which results take time and resisting the urge to rush them. It means making decisions today that may not pay off immediately but will create leverage in the future. This kind of patience requires confidence, not in outcomes, but in process. Those who think long-term don't panic when results are slow, they expect it. They know that early stages are often quiet and uncomfortable. Growth doesn't announce itself at the beginning. It tests commitment first. Many people quit during this phase because they mistake slow progress for failure. Long-term thinkers recognize it as preparation. Short-term thinking also narrows perspective. It focuses attention on immediate rewards rather than lasting impact. When rewards become the goal, quality often suffers. Decisions are made for speed instead of sustainability. Over time, this creates fragile success that collapses under pressure because it wasn't built to last. Long-term thinking shifts the question from what can I get now to what am I building? That question changes behavior. It encourages learning instead of shortcuts. It favors depth over visibility. It prioritizes systems over outcomes. Systems once established continue to produce results long after the initial effort is made. The challenge with long-term thinking is that it requires faith without evidence. In the beginning, there are no guarantees, no applause, and often no measurable progress. This is where most people turn back. But those who stay committed during this phase build an advantage that compounds quietly. By the time results become visible, the foundation is already strong. Strategic patience also allows you to make better decisions. When you're not desperate for immediate results, you're less likely to compromise your values or cut corners. You can say no to opportunities that don't align with your long-term vision. You can invest time and energy into work that may not pay off right away but will matter later. In a world obsessed with speed, those who slow down strategically gain clarity. They understand that momentum is not about how fast you move, but how long you can keep moving in the right direction. They design their efforts to be sustainable, knowing that burnout ends progress faster than patience ever will. When you fix short-term thinking, you stop chasing outcomes and start building foundations. You trust the process enough to stay consistent when motivation fades. And as time passes, those small daily actions begin to separate you from those who relied on intensity alone. What you're building may take longer, but when it stands strong and it lasts. It's easy to blame systems, timing, or circumstances. When things don't go as planned, there is always something external to point at: the economy, the market, the algorithm, other people, past decisions. Blame offers temporary relief because it removes pressure from the present moment. It tells you that the problem lies somewhere outside of you. But relief is not progress. And the longer responsibility is avoided, the longer progress is delayed. Ownership is power. It doesn't feel that way at first because responsibility is often confused with burden. Many people associate responsibility with stress, expectations, and the risk of failure. So they avoid it thinking they are protecting themselves. In reality, they are giving away the one thing that allows change to happen. When you don't own the outcome, you don't control it. When you don't control it, you wait. The moment you say, this is on me, something shifts. You may not like the situation, you may not have caused it, but the act of ownership returns agency. It moves you from reaction to action. You stop asking who is responsible and start asking what you can do next. That shift alone creates momentum. Responsibility is not about self-blame, it's about self-leadership. Blame looks backward, responsibility looks forward. Blame asks why this happened, responsibility asks what now. When you focus on what now, you unlock options that blame will never show you. Fear of responsibility often hides behind the idea of fairness. People say, it's not my fault, and they're often right. But fault and responsibility are not the same. You can be responsible for fixing something you didn't cause. And that willingness is what separates those who stay stuck from those who move forward. Responsibility isn't a burden, it's a threshold. It's the moment you stop waiting for permission to become who you're capable of being. Waiting for permission keeps you small. It keeps you dependent on approval, opportunity, or perfect conditions. Responsibility says, I don't need permission to improve my situation. I can begin now. Many people wait to be chosen. They wait to be recognized, promoted, invited, or validated. But leaders aren't chosen. They step forward. They see a gap and take ownership of it. They see a problem and accept responsibility for addressing it, even when it's uncomfortable and even when no one asks them to. Taking responsibility also builds trust. People trust those who don't hide when things go wrong. They trust those who say, I'll handle this, and mean it. Trust is built not through perfection, but through accountability. When others see you own outcomes, they are more willing to follow, support, and collaborate. There is also freedom and responsibility. When you stop blaming circumstances, you stop giving them power over your emotions. You no longer feel trapped by what you can't control because your focus shifts to what you can. That focus reduces anxiety and increases clarity. You become calmer, not because everything is fixed, but because you know you can respond. Avoiding responsibility often looks like staying busy without direction. Activity becomes a way to feel productive without committing to outcomes. Responsibility demands commitment. It asks you to define what success looks like and to stand by your choices even when results are uncertain. That commitment can be uncomfortable, but it is also where growth lives. When you take responsibility, excuses lose their grip. You stop explaining why things can't be done and start exploring how they might be done. That mindset attracts opportunities because it signals reliability. People look for those who can be counted on, especially in uncertain environments. In 2026, those who thrive will not be those with the best excuses or the most polished explanations. They will be those who are willing to take ownership in moments of uncertainty. They will step forward when others step back. They will accept responsibility not because it's easy, but because they understand that responsibility is the price of influence. When you fix the fear of responsibility, you stop seeing it as something that weighs you down and start seeing it as something that lifts you up. You realize that the moment you take ownership, you regain control of your direction. And from that point forward, you are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing yourself. This may be the most dangerous mindset of all, because it quietly convinces people to give up before they even begin. The belief that you're already too late sounds logical on the surface. It uses timing, competition, and comparison as evidence. I should have started earlier. It's too competitive now. I missed my chance. These thoughts feel reasonable, but they are not facts. They are assumptions. And assumptions, when left unchallenged, become barriers that don't actually exist. The idea of being too late usually comes from comparison. You look at people who started before you and assume their head start makes your effort meaningless. You see success stories that seem far ahead of where you are and conclude that the gap is impossible to close. But what you're really seeing is the middle of someone else's journey, not the beginning. You rarely see the confusion, uncertainty, and setbacks that happened before momentum was built. The truth is simple. The best time to start was yesterday. The second best time is now. That statement isn't motivational, it's practical. Time moves forward whether you act or not. Waiting doesn't rewind the clock. It only increases the distance between where you are and where you could be. Starting now is not about catching up to others. It's about no longer falling further behind your own potential. 2026 doesn't reward age, background, or past mistakes. It rewards commitment. The world no longer follows linear paths where success belongs only to those who followed a specific timeline. Careers change, industries reset, new opportunities emerge. What matters is not when you began, but whether you are willing to commit consistently once you do. Believing you're too late often becomes a way to protect yourself from risk. If you tell yourself the opportunity has passed, you don't have to face the discomfort of starting. You don't have to risk failure, rejection, or slow progress. But that protection comes at a cost. It costs you growth. It costs you experience. And over time, it costs you confidence. Many people mistake being late with being inexperienced. But inexperience is not a disadvantage when paired with curiosity and effort. In fact, beginners often move faster because they are not constrained by old assumptions. They ask questions others stopped asking. They try approaches others stopped considering. Starting fresh can be an advantage if you're willing to learn openly. Another reason people feel too late is because they underestimate the power of focus. They assume that because others started earlier, they must work harder to compete. In reality, focused effort over a shorter period can outperform unfocused effort over years. Consistency compounds quickly when attention is undivided. What looks like overnight success is often the result of deep focus applied at the right time. The belief that you missed your chance assumes there was only one opportunity meant for you. That's rarely true. Life offers multiple paths, and many of them don't appear until you start moving. Opportunities often reveal themselves through action, not waiting. When you begin even imperfectly, you enter environments where new options exist. Feeling behind is also influenced by unrealistic timelines. Social narratives often compress years of effort into moments of visible success. This distortion makes progress feel slower than it actually is. When you measure yourself against these illusions, patience disappears. But real progress operates on a different clock, one that rewards persistence, not speed. You're not behind, you're just at the beginning of a different path. And different does not mean worse. It means tailored to who you are now, with the knowledge, awareness, and priorities you didn't have before. Starting later often brings clarity. You know what matters. You know what you're willing to commit to. That clarity can accelerate progress in ways early starts cannot. Choosing to start now is an act of self-respect. It says that your future is worth investing in, even if the past didn't unfold perfectly. It shifts focus from regret to responsibility. Regret looks backward and drains energy. Responsibility looks forward and creates momentum. If you wait until you feel on time, you'll never begin. There will always be someone ahead, always be reasons to delay. But when you choose commitment over comparison, timing loses its power. You stop asking whether it's too late and start asking what you can do today. The path still belongs to you if you choose it, not because it's easy, not because success is guaranteed, but because progress has always belonged to those who decided that starting now was better than waiting forever. Your mindset is not a personality trait, it's a practice. And the people who thrive in 2026 won't be the ones with the most resources, they'll be the ones who were brave enough to rethink how they see the world, themselves and what's possible. Fix the mindset and everything else follows.